Hey guys, tonight we are sailing across the world's largest expanse of blue, into a dot so tiny on most maps you'd probably miss it even if you sneezed. That dot is Easter Island, Rapa Nui, as its people call it. And here you're about to step onto volcanic ground where silent stone giants have been staring at the horizon for centuries. Imagine this: endless Pacific waves rolling in with a slow heartbeat, salt air brushing against your skin, and far off, shadows of statues with heads bigger than cars waiting like patient guardians. You're out here at the edge of everything. And no, you probably won't survive this if you forgot your sunscreen, water, and maybe a decent Wi-Fi signal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and the local time. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals crunch on black volcanic rock as you set foot on this isolated island. The waves pull back and slap again against the shore. Like a drummer trying to get your attention, you're standing where Polynesian explorers once made landfall, probably sometime around the 12th century. That's the mainstream historical consensus. At least, the idea that they sailed from somewhere like the Marquesas or Mangareva, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, feels both insane and heroic. No GPS, no TikTok livestream to brag about it. Just stars, currents, and courage. Close your eyes for a second. You can almost feel the heaving canoe beneath you, carved from giant trees back home. The sails snap, and there's the smell of dried fish packed for the voyage. Maybe you brought chickens, rats, uninvited stowaways, oops, and cuttings of sweet potato, because you're not about to survive on coconuts alone. Scholars still argue whether these settlers arrived in a single heroic wave or in multiple pulses over generations. But what's certain is that when they got here, they found an island full of possibilities and palm trees. So many palm trees, you walk inland, hearing the crunch of dried fronds underfoot. Imagine a dense forest canopy swaying in Pacific winds, with nesting seabirds flapping in noisy clouds above. It's not the barren grassland people think of when they imagine Easter Island today. This was a lush place, a green jewel set in endless blue. Streams trickle through gullies, soil felt fertile under bare feet, and the ocean's reefs were bursting with fish. Early Rapa Nui must have thought, jackpot. But jackpot came with risks. Islands are fragile. One storm, one bad season, and you're suddenly wishing you hadn't invited your cousin's entire clan to move here. Picture the first settlers building small huts out of reeds, their fires glowing against night skies thick with stars. They sang chants to honor their ancestors, their voices rolling over the cliffs like a lullaby. And if you think the stars look good from your backyard, well, out here, you see the Milky Way stretch like a silver highway across the heavens. No light pollution, no city glare, just infinite sky. You trail past the first gardens, the earth turned carefully by hand. Archaeologists have found evidence of stone gardens, basically plots where rocks were used to trap moisture and protect plants from salty winds. Ingenious, right? Sweet potatoes, yams, taro, all starting to take root in this volcanic soil. Chickens clucked in small stone enclosures. The sound of feathers rustling in twilight. Rats scampered too. And while they were probably a nuisance, they also became food when times got tough. Don't look at me like that. You'd eat one too if you were starving. The air smells faintly of salt and wood smoke. Somewhere out there, a shell trumpet blares, a deep, haunting call that echoes across hillsides. You shiver. Was it a signal to gather? A spiritual announcement? Or just someone messing around with prehistoric jazz? Historians still argue whether these instruments were used mainly for ritual or just for big parties. But you can imagine the sound threading through palm groves, bouncing across volcanic slopes. Walk further, and you'll see the island's volcanic craters looming like sleeping beasts. Ranokau, with its vast green lake inside, and Ranoraraku, which one day will become the nursery of the famous Moai statues. But right now, to these first settlers, the craters are sacred landscapes, places to fish for reeds or gather stone. Smoke curls upward from campfires, and children chase each other with sticks while elders chant stories that tether memory to land. There's something both fragile and defiant in this beginning. You can almost hear the ancestors whisper, "We made it across the endless sea. This is home now." And just like that, the island starts to weave humans into its volcanic fabric. Every footprint you imagine pressing into the soil feels heavy with destiny. Of course, it wasn't paradise forever. Archaeologists debate exactly when resources began to thin, when trees started to fall too fast. But for now, in this moment, it's the dream phase. Fresh water in the crater lakes, seabirds nesting in noisy colonies, fertile gardens blossoming with imported crops. You can practically smell roasted chicken drifting on the wind, mingled with the sweetness of baked yams. You tilt your head back and the stars are dizzying. Picture yourself lying on a woven mat, belly full, listening to waves and crackling fire. A chief might stand, silhouetted against the sky, raising hands in a chant of thanks. In that chant is pride, fear, longing, and hope. The sea brought them here, and the sea will test them. But for now, the sea simply whispers, while silent volcanic slopes stand witness. The shell trumpet blows again, low, mournful, a sound that clings to your bones. You close your eyes. Tonight, you've stepped into the first footsteps of the Rapa Nui, carving out life at the farthest edge of the world. You wake to the faint cry of seabirds, their wings brushing dawn's first light, and you realize you're not alone on this rock in the Pacific anymore. Imagine the scene: dugout canoes nudging onto the shore, carved prows still dripping with salt spray, sails slapping in the morning breeze. These are not random wanderers, they are deliberate voyagers. Polynesian navigators who dared to cross thousands of miles of open water with nothing but stars, swells, and memory to guide them. You watch as men, women, and children step gingerly onto black sand, their feet sinking into volcanic grit. Behind them, bundles of cuttings, sweet potatoes, taro, bananas are lifted carefully, like sacred cargo. Chickens cluck nervously inside woven cages. The future of Rapa Nui is wobbling in someone's arms. You squint and imagine the skill it took to reach this island. No modern compass, no GPS app bleeding recalculating. Instead, they read star maps etched in their minds, noticed the color of the ocean water, and watched the flight of birds that hinted at nearby land. Mainstream historians put this settlement around the 12th century, though some fringe theories whisper it could have been earlier. Maybe as early as 800 CE? You shrug. Time feels slippery out here. Either way, it's gutsy. You think you're brave when you switch from Wi-Fi to mobile data. But crossing 0 miles of Pacific in a canoe. Different level of commitment. Children squeal as they touch the soil. Elders bend, scoop up handfuls, and let the dirt trickle through their fingers, reading its fertility the way some of us read coffee grounds. The first fires are built, smoke rising against the pale sky. You catch the smell of fish sizzling on flat stones, mingled with the sweetness of roasted kumara. This is the island's first breakfast, a feast both humble and triumphant, and yet challenges lurk behind the horizon. The palms sway thick and green. But are they endless? The seabirds dive in clouds. But will they always be this abundant? Historians still argue whether the initial settlers understood the fragility of island ecosystems, or whether they simply saw plenty and thought, cool, unlimited buffet. For now, though, they're focused on survival, not sustainability reports. One quirky tidbit slips into your mind. These settlers probably brought the Polynesian rat with them. Intentionally or not, picture it. Tiny, furry stowaways scrambling off the canoes, eyes bright, whiskers twitching. Those rats will chew through seeds, gnaw saplings, and play a quiet but devastating role in reshaping the island's ecology. You almost want to laugh. Imagine surviving a 1,000-mile voyage, only to lose your forest to rodents. It's the prehistoric equivalent of downloading a virus by clicking Free Minecraft. The new community begins to spread out. Small huts built from reeds rise near the coast. Nets are cast into the surf. Pulling in shimmering fish, gardens are laid out with stones to shield tender shoots from salty wind. You crouch. Run your hand over one of these rock mulches. Still visible in the soil today? The technique is brilliant. Rocks trap moisture, reduce erosion, and create microclimates for plants. Ingenious survival hack. Centuries before TikTok made life hacks a thing. Nights are thick with stars. The Milky Way glows like spilled milk across the sky. And you lie on your back, listening to elders chant. Their voices carry stories of gods, ancestors, and the ocean itself. Each chant is a compass, a library, a family tree. The crackle of fire punctuates the rhythm, and the children fall asleep with the taste of smoked fish still on their tongues. You hear the conch shell again? Long, low, resonant. It echoes through palm groves, startling seabirds into flight. You press your palms to your ears, but the sound still vibrates in your chest. Was it a call to gather, a ritual summons, or just the island version of dinner's ready? Archaeologists aren't sure. You smile, imagining someone in the 1200s practicing scales on a shell trumpet while everyone else groans. Not again. As moons pass, canoes are hauled up further on shore. You see men repairing sails, sharpening adzes, planning expeditions around the island, perhaps scouting cliffs for seabird eggs or craters for reeds. Rano Kau looms like a massive bowl on the horizon, its inner lake reflecting sky, while Rano Raraku waits silently. Stone waiting to become statue. You don't know it yet, but the quarry will define the island's destiny. Still, for now, life is balanced. Crops grow, chickens scratch in stone pens, fish bones pile near hearths, babies are born, their cries blending with ocean surf. There's laughter, songs, disputes, and reconciliations. It feels ordinary, human, and fragile all at once. The palms keep swaying, their trunks tall and straight. Future canoes just waiting to be carved. The people look out at the sea and whisper to themselves, "We made it." And you, lying in the grass tonight, feel the same whisper settle in your chest. Against impossible odds, humans have found a way to make this far-flung speck of rock into home. You step further inland, leaving the coastline behind, and the sound of waves fades into a hush of wind moving through palms. The forest is thick, a canopy of giant trees swaying, their trunks so wide you can't wrap your arms around them. You imagine what the first generations must have felt. This land is fresh, unscarred, full of possibility. Here, they begin building not just homes, but a fragile paradise, one carefully coaxed from volcanic soil that doesn't always cooperate. The ground crunches beneath your feet, not just with fallen leaves, but with stones. Stones deliberately placed. The Rapa Nui developed ingenious gardens called manavi, circular rock enclosures that protect crops from salty winds and help retain precious moisture. You crouch down and touch the warm stone, feeling how it radiates the day's heat back into the soil at night, sheltering little green shoots. Sweet potatoes push their way through, taro leaves glisten with dew, and banana plants rustle softly. You realize this wasn't trial and error. It was a system, a plan. Historians still argue whether they learned it here from scratch or adapted techniques carried across the Pacific. Either way, it worked. You wander further and notice low walls of stone scattered across the landscape. They aren't for defense, they're chicken runs. Inside, feathers scatter, and you hear clucks and scratching. Chickens, brought over in those first canoes, became vital protein when fishing got tricky. You chuckle, imagining an ancestor carefully designing a poultry palace out of lava rock. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, defiant as ever. Water, though that's always the concern on an island without rivers. You walk toward a crater, Rano Kau, and peer down. Its lake glistens like a dark mirror, reeds swaying at the edges. This, you realize, was a lifeline. The islanders would gather reeds for thatching roofs and draw water to drink. Further along the coast, you notice stone-lined wells called taheta, dug to collect rainwater. Survival here meant paying attention to every drop, every cloud. One missed season of rain and suddenly things could tilt toward hunger. Still, for now, there's abundance. You hear laughter drifting from a clearing, families gathered around fires, pounding roots into paste, wrapping food in leaves to bake in earth ovens. Smoke rises, and the air smells of roasted tubers and salty fish. Children dart between huts, chasing each other, their bare feet slapping against packed dirt. Elders sit in the shade, telling stories. They speak of gods tied to the sea and sky, of ancestors whose spirits sail invisibly above. Those chants carry across the island like the heartbeat of culture. One quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts. Archaeologists have found that the Rapa Nui sometimes mulched soil with broken pieces of obsidian. That's right, sharp volcanic glass, normally used for tools, ended up spread in fields to help crops. Imagine telling your farmer friend today, "Yeah, I sprinkle my fields with knife shards. It's great for the yams." You'd get some looks, but here, it was brilliant. Obsidian warmed the soil and kept weeds down. As twilight falls, you sense how fragile this paradise really is. There are no vast rivers, no towering mountains with glaciers to melt and feed streams. Everything depends on careful management, on making sure the palms aren't overcut, that the gardens stay fertile, that chickens keep laying eggs. You can almost hear a chief reminding his clan, "Take care of the land, and it will take care of you." But whispers of risk already thread through the air. Historians still argue whether the population boomed too quickly, or whether climate shifts made things harder. The truth might be both. For now, though, you lean back against a palm trunk, hearing the rustle of fronds above. The island feels safe, almost like it's holding you in its green hands. As stars blink awake, the shell trumpet sounds again. Its call drifts across the island, low and resonant. Maybe it's announcing a feast, or maybe just marking time. The sound mingles with the night chorus of insects and the faint crow of restless chickens. You close your eyes, and the fragile paradise hums around you, an experiment in survival, thriving for the moment, perched on the edge of the world. You follow a winding path that leads toward the eastern slopes, where a crater looms like a broken crown. This is Rano Raraku, the sacred quarry. The air shifts as you step closer, cooler, scented faintly with volcanic dust. Your sandals scrape against pumice and tuff, and suddenly you see them. Faces everywhere, half-carved giants leaning out of the ground. Their features frozen mid-creation, rows of Moai, some upright, some lying flat, some still fused to the rock like dreamers who never woke. It feels eerie, like you've stumbled into a workshop abandoned yesterday. Chisel marks are visible, grooves cut deep into the stone. You imagine the sound, the steady thunk-thunk-thunk of basalt hammers striking volcanic tuff. Sparks fly, voices shout over the racket, and clouds of dust rise in the crater air. The Rapa Nui carvers worked in teams, shaping colossal heads and torsos with almost impossible patience. Mainstream historians agree this was the nursery of nearly every statue on the island. Almost 1,000 Moai in total. That's a lot of backbreaking shifts without a union break. Picture one being born. First, a rough outline. Then cheekbones sharpened, noses extended, lips pressed thin. The Moai aren't just decorations, they're ancestors. Imbued with mana, spiritual force, every stroke of the chisel wasn't just labor. It was a prayer. The carvers might have sung as they worked, chants rising into the crater sky, their rhythm keeping the stone alive. But here's a quirky detail you can't shake. Many Moai are buried to their shoulders in the earth, their heads looming like giant chess pieces. For decades, outsiders thought they were only heads. Surprise, they've got full bodies underground, with carved hands, backs etched with petroglyphs. Imagine the archaeologists' faces when they dug down and realized the island wasn't just the world's largest head collection. Somewhere, you hear a faint snort of cosmic laughter. Scholars still argue about how statues were assigned. Were they clan projects, commissioned by chiefs, or massive community efforts pooling everyone's labor? Maybe all of the above. What's certain is that carving was only half the ordeal. Each Moai weighed tons, some the size of school buses. Getting them from quarry to ahu platforms near villages was like moving mountains with Stone Age tools. You walk past a half-finished Moai still clinging to the bedrock, as if waiting for one last blow of the chisel. The sun sets, painting the crater walls orange and gold, shadows lengthening across the unfinished giants. Workers would have paused here, wiping sweat, their hands raw, their backs screaming, yet they kept carving generation after generation, each statue taller, more ambitious, as if locked in an arms race of stone. At night, imagine fires flickering on the crater rim, the Moai below glowing faintly in the light. The workers rest, eating roasted tubers, trading jokes, maybe grumbling about how the neighboring clan statue has a straighter nose. You grin. Human competitiveness doesn't change much. Even in paradise, someone's keeping score. The wind whistles through unfinished ears. The giants, silent now, seem to lean in, listening to your breath. You press your palm against cool stone and feel a trace of centuries-old intent. Faith, ambition, devotion. Here, in Ranoraraku, stone was not just stone. It was memory, power, and promise, waiting to stand and watch over the living. You leave the quarry, but the mystery deepens. Because carving Moai was only step one. Step two, moving them. And that's the part that makes your head spin. You stand at the edge of a dirt path winding toward the coast, imagining tons of volcanic stone being shifted without wheels, without beasts of burden, without even metal tools. Yet somehow, these statues, up to 30 feet tall, ended up scattered across the island like giant breadcrumbs. Mainstream theory for decades was that they were dragged horizontally on sledges or logs. You can picture it. Dozens of men hauling with ropes, sweat pouring down their backs, wood creaking, people shouting instructions. But then there's the math problem. Easter Island's forest eventually disappeared. So how could they use endless logs? Historians still argue whether deforestation doomed them, or whether the Moai themselves consumed too many trees. Either way, the mystery lingers. Then, a quirky twist? Some modern experiments show the statues could have been walked upright. Imagine ropes tied to either side of a Moai, teams pulling left and right, rocking it forward step by step. The thing actually waddles down the road like a giant penguin on a mission. Archaeologists tried it with replicas, and shockingly, it worked. So maybe when islanders said the statues walked, they weren't being poetic. Picture a midnight procession, flames lighting the path, as these massive stone ancestors sway their way toward the villages. Tell me that wouldn't look like a scene from a supernatural Netflix special. As you stroll along, you notice deep grooves in the earth, tracks where statues were hauled or rocked. Some Moai never made it. Toppled and abandoned mid-journey, they lie on their sides like colossal drunk uncles who couldn't handle the party. You run your hand over one, imagining the frustration of the team who hauled it miles, only to see it crash into the dirt. Did they cry? Did they curse? Or did they shrug and carve a bigger one to prove a point? Night settles, and you hear echoes of rope creaking, men chanting in rhythm, the statue groaning forward. The air tastes of sweat and smoke. A chief watches, arms crossed, measuring prestige in each step the Moai takes. Bigger statues meant more status, more pride for the clan, It wasn't just engineering, it was politics carved in stone. Here's a fun detail. Some oral traditions suggest Moai moved with supernatural power, guided by priests chanting spells. From your modern perspective, it's easy to dismiss, but when you see a 10-ton stone walking upright under torchlight, wouldn't you start believing too? In the middle of the Pacific, magic and engineering blur into one shimmering possibility. You pause and glance back toward Rano Raraku, its crater now swallowed in shadow. The paths stretch outward like veins, each one once carrying a giant ancestor toward its resting place. It's dizzying to think of the labor, the coordination, the sheer stubborn will it took. Every toppled Moai along the road whispers of exhaustion, of ambitions too heavy to carry, of dreams that fell flat, literally, but enough made it. Enough stood tall on platforms by the sea, their backs to the waves, their gaze fixed on the living, and that, you realize, was the true triumph. Not just carving stone, but making it move, breathe, and stand where it had no business standing. The island itself became a theater of the impossible, where mountains learn to walk. You wander closer to the coastline now, where several Moai stand tall, their profiles sharp against the sky, but something is missing. Their faces are solemn, their jaws strong, yet their sockets are hollow. You lean in, half expecting a glimmer, but no, these giants once had eyes. And not just any eyes. They were set with gleaming white coral and dark stone pupils, a gaze so piercing it could chill your spine. Imagine the moment, after weeks of back-breaking effort hauling a statue into place, after ropes are loosened and the chanting fades, the final act is to open the Moai's eyes. Coral discs are fitted into sockets, a black obsidian or red scoria pupil pressed at the center. Suddenly the statue isn't just rock, it's alive, infused with mana, spiritual force. The air thickens. Villagers hush, a priest raises his arms, chanting as the ancestor spirit steps into stone. That's the exact second when the giant stops being a lump of tuff and becomes a guardian. Historians still argue whether every Moai had eyes or only select ones. But the symbolism is clear. Without eyes, a statue sleeps. With eyes, it watches, judges, protects. You almost feel yourself squirm under that imaginary gaze, like you've been caught checking your phone during a sacred ritual. One quirky tidbit makes you smile. The eye sockets weren't carved until the statue was upright. That means the Moai lay there blank face through its whole journey, only to receive its soul at the very end. It's like waiting to install the batteries on a giant ancestor-shaped action figure. And once the eyes went in, the village believed the Moai could see their offerings, hear their prayers, even guard their crops. Step closer to the base, and you notice something curious. Red stone hats, called pukao, stacked on some Moai's heads. They're carved from a different quarry, Punapao, a volcanic crater of soft red scoria. Scholars still argue what the hats represent. Top knots of hair, sacred crowns. Some suggest they symbolize status, others fertility. You tilt your head, imagining an entire clan squabbling over how tall the hat should be, like prehistoric fashion designers with zero chill. The setting sun casts long shadows, and the statues seem to glow in fading light. With their eyes, they would have gazed inland, never at the ocean. That's important. These giants weren't there to admire sunsets or watch passing whales. They were guardians of the people, facing villages, radiating mana. To turn your back on the sea and look after your descendants, that was the ultimate act of devotion. You hear drums now, faint at first, then louder. The community is gathering, laying offerings of food, shells, maybe small carvings at the base of the platform. A shell trumpet blares, its sound bouncing off the cliffs. The Moai's new eyes glint in torchlight, and you swear its lips curve, just slightly. In recognition, it's not smiling, but it is watching forever. As the night deepens, you can't help but feel the weight of those coral eyes. They don't just look, they see They remind you of a truth whispered through centuries. Stone can live if belief carves deep enough. And on Rapa Nui, belief was strong enough to make giants breathe. You walk along the coast where waves slap against black rock, the salt spray misting your face. Ahead of you, stone platforms stretch out like stages overlooking the ocean. These are the Ahu ceremonial platforms where the Moai stand. Each one is carefully constructed, layers of basalt fitted like puzzle pieces. Flat stones smoothed by patient hands. You kneel down and run your fingers across the join. No mortar. Yet the blocks cling together as if they've been locked by time itself. The statues on these platforms all face inland. It's striking. Dozens of stone ancestors turning their backs to the horizon. You tilt your head, wondering why. Then it clicks. They aren't guardians of the sea, but of the people. Their eyes, once bright with coral, watched over villages, gardens, and clans. It's a reminder that survival on this fragile rock depended on community. The Moai weren't spectators of sunsets. They were watchmen of daily bread. Mainstream history holds that each clan built its own Ahu, staking pride in how many statues they could raise and how tall they could stand. You picture rival families along the coast, competing not with spears at first, but with stone ancestors, trying to outdo each other in height, elegance, and numbers. Scholars still argue whether this competition united the island through shared tradition or pushed it toward collapse. Either way, the result is breathtaking. An island ringed with silent guardians, facing people instead of ocean. As you walk from platform to platform, you notice subtle differences. Some Moai have red pukao hats, others stand bareheaded. Some platforms are enormous, stretching the length of a modern soccer field. Others are modest, holding only one or two statues, but each represents a village, a clan, a lineage carved into stone. Imagine standing here centuries ago, smoke from cooking fires rising inland, children running barefoot, drums thudding in the evening air. Behind them, Moai stare, unmoving, yet alive in the imagination of the people. One quirky tidbit comes to mind. Excavations have revealed that some Ahu contained burials, human remains carefully interred beneath the stone. That means these platforms weren't just display stands, they were sacred cemeteries. Places where ancestors both rested and rose again as statues. It's like combining a graveyard, church, and national monument all in one lava rock structure. You close your eyes, and the scene sharpens. Torches flicker, throwing shadows across the Moai. Priests chant, their voices blending with the ocean's hiss. Offerings of food, feathers, and shell ornaments are laid at the platform's base. The air smells of smoke and salt, of earth ovens cooking feasts nearby. A conch trumpet calls, and villagers raise their hands toward the statues, murmuring prayers for fertile crops, safe fishing, strong children. Then a joke drifts through your mind. Somewhere in the crowd, a mischievous kid probably stuck out his tongue at the Moai, daring the ancestor to blink. Human nature doesn't change much, ritual or not. There's always one prankster. The moon rises, and the platforms gleam like stages lit for a midnight play. You sense the weight of centuries, of countless ceremonies, arguments, reconciliations, and celebrations that happened under these stone gazes. Each Ahu is more than stone. It's memory, identity, and faith pressed into a platform that endures even as villages vanish. You step back, the sea roaring behind you, the Moai unflinching before you. And in that stillness, you understand. This wasn't just architecture. This was communion between the living and the dead. A promise that no matter how fragile life here became, the ancestors would never stop watching. Night falls, and you drift toward the glow of firelight rising from a village near one of the great platforms. The air is thick with smells, smoke from earth ovens, roasted fish, sweet potatoes baked until their skins crackle. The community gathers, voices buzzing like cicadas. As anticipation builds for a feast, you slide into the circle and feel the rhythm start to pulse through the ground. Drums thud, steady at first, then faster, like the heartbeat of the island itself. Women sway, hips rolling in graceful arcs, their arms carving patterns in firelight. Men leap and stamp, their chants low and fierce. You lean back, mesmerized, as sparks drift upward into the dark sky. The Moai stand just beyond, looming silhouettes, their hollow eyes now filled with imagination. It's as if the ancestors themselves are leaning closer, listening to the revelry. Suddenly a blast cuts through the night, a shell trumpet. Its deep, mournful call echoes between cliffs and carries across the fields. Vibrating in your ribs, another trumpet answers from the far side of the island. And then another. The sound rolls like thunder, connecting villages in a chorus. Were they announcing ceremony, summoning clans, or just showing off how far the echo could travel? Historians still argue about their purpose. You grin, picturing a kid sneaking off with one to prank the neighbors at midnight. The feast begins. Food wrapped in banana leaves is pulled from steaming pits in the ground. Tubers, chicken, and fish tumble out, hot and fragrant. People clap, chant thanks, and pile their plates. You take a bite, sweet potato so soft it melts. Salty fish balanced with smoky undertones. This is not just dinner, it's communion. A reminder that survival is sweeter when shared. Between courses, dancers leap back into the firelight. Some wear feathered headdresses. Others paint their bodies with white and red designs. You see patterns of birds, waves, and spirals painted across chests and arms. Images that later appear scratched into rock. The drums quicken, the singing rises, and you feel the island itself vibrating with energy. Here's a quirky detail. Archaeological digs have uncovered musical instruments besides trumpets, nose flutes and rattles made from gourds. Imagine the soundscape, a nasal whistle winding above the bass of drums, rattles shaking like 1,000 dry seeds in the wind. Add in the haunting blare of shell trumpets, and you've got a prehistoric orchestra that could rattle your bones and lull you to sleep all at once. Children doze against their mothers' shoulders, lulled by rhythm and smoke. Elders clap in time, their eyes reflecting firelight. Priests stand near the platform, lifting hands toward the statues. The chants now are solemn, weaving gratitude with requests. Let the crops grow. Let the seas be generous. Let the clan stay strong. The Moai loom behind, their presence anchoring the ceremony. You swear the flames flicker higher, as though the statues themselves approve. The night stretches long. The trumpets call again, softer this time, as if saying goodnight. The fire burns low, embers glowing red in the sand. Drums slow. Dancers rest. The air still hums with energy, like the island is catching its breath. You lie back in the grass, full and sleepy, the Milky Way sprawling overhead. The last sounds you hear are the distant echo of waves and a single shell note, floating across the cliffs like a lullaby. By the time morning breaks, you've wandered into the tangled web of power that threads through the island. The feasts and dances might look harmonious, but beneath them lies rivalry, clans jostling for prestige, chiefs flexing their status in stone and ceremony. You stand on a bluff and gaze across the island, noticing how Moai platforms punctuate the shoreline. Each one belongs to a lineage, a family group staking its claim. Bigger Moai, stronger mana, more statues, greater pride. It's like prehistoric billboard advertising, except instead of neon lights, you've got 30 tons of volcanic stone glaring at your rivals. Mainstream historians describe a system of chiefdoms, each clan ruled by an arikai, or high chief. They managed resources, led rituals, and, crucially, decided how many statues their people should carve. You can imagine the pressure. Our neighbors raised 6 Moai this year. We'll raise 8. Ours will have taller hats and straighter noses. Scholars still argue whether this escalating competition fueled innovation or simply bled the island dry. Either way, the evidence is scattered across the landscape in silent stone witnesses, One quirky tidbit adds spice. Some oral traditions hint at statue sabotage. Rival clans might topple each other's Moai in acts of defiance. Picture it. A midnight raid, ropes straining, a giant ancestor crashing to the ground while the attackers stifle giggles. It's both tragic and absurd. Sacred guardians becoming casualties of political one-upmanship. You almost expect someone to mutter, "Take that, Uncle Vi's clan." As you descend the bluff, the daily rhythms of village life appear. Women tend gardens, their hands deftly weeding among stone mulches. Men haul logs, build canoes, or practice with obsidian-tipped spears. Children run barefoot, playing games that mimic adult rituals. Tiny versions of chants, mock processions with carved wooden toys. Everywhere you go, the statues loom in the background. Constant reminders that your ancestors are watching, silently tallying every success and failure, even at meals. Politics lingers. Chiefs sit slightly elevated. Portions bigger, voices louder. Their authority is both respected and resented. You catch whispers of discontent. Why does one family command more labor, more resources, more fish? Why must we break our backs to move yet another stone giant while our gardens wither? Historians still argue whether this resentment boiled over gradually or in bursts of sudden conflict. But the seeds of division are easy to imagine. Yet, in balance, pride knits people together too. When a Moai is raised successfully, when its coral eyes gleam for the first time, the entire clan celebrates, drums pound, trumpets blare, feast erupt, and for a moment, rivalry transforms into solidarity. The island pulses with joy, and even the ancestors, stone-faced though they are, seem to share in the triumph. At dusk, you watch two clans gather for a joint ceremony. Their chiefs eye each other warily, exchanging curt nods, like politicians shaking hands for the cameras. Behind them, dancers from both groups whirl in circles, their movements mirroring each other in firelight. The statues stand close, their shadows overlapping as if the ancestors themselves are forced to mingle. You wonder how many of these uneasy alliances were forged beneath the gaze of giants. Alliances destined to fray. As the stars prick the sky, a shell trumpet blasts, and the crowd falls silent. Priests chant, invoking the mana of both lineages. You close your eyes and let the voices wash over you, sensing how fragile this balance really is. Pride binds, but pride also fractures, and somewhere, in the darkness beyond the torches, you can almost hear the first whispers of trouble. The next morning, you wander inland, and the soundscape changes. The chatter of villages fades, replaced by a silence broken only by the wind tugging through grass. You realize something feels off. The palms that once cloaked the island, tall and swaying, are thinning where there should be forests. You find stumps, charred remnants, and bare slopes that bake under the sun. It dawns on you. The forest is vanishing. Mainstream history tells us Rapa Nui was once covered with giant palms, some towering higher than a 6-story building. Their wood-made canoes, homes, and rollers for hauling Moai, but over centuries, those trees were felled, first for survival, then for ambition. Every Moai hauled required logs. Every growing clan needed farmland. And rats, those furry stowaways, gnawed at seeds, preventing regrowth. Scholars still argue which came first. Did overpopulation spark deforestation? Or did the rats tip the balance? Either way, the lush canopy you imagined earlier is collapsing into memory. You crunch over parched soil, without trees. The land erodes, rain runs off instead of soaking in, crops struggle, streams shrink. The seabirds that once filled the skies with noise are quieter now, nesting elsewhere. Canoes become scarce because the great palms are gone. So fishing trips shrink closer to shore. Imagine standing on this rock, staring at the endless Pacific, and realizing you no longer have the means to sail beyond the horizon. It's like living on a sinking ship with no lifeboats. A quirky tidbit makes you pause. Pollen analysis from sediment cores shows the timing of deforestation. Tiny fossil grains recording each palm's fall like a diary in the mud. You almost chuckle. Trees may not tweet, but they still left receipts. The social tension builds. Rival clans keep demanding bigger statues. Even as resources dwindle, the irony gnaws at you. Forests fall to Hallstone giants who are supposed to protect the people, but their very construction hastens collapse. You hear the distant creak of ropes, the chanting of men hauling, but instead of triumph, the sound carries desperation. Each statue raised as proof of power, yet also another nail in the coffin of the island's ecosystem. By night, the ceremonies continue, drums pound, trumpets echo, feasts are held, but the portions shrink. Chickens become rarer, gardens yield less. You notice people glancing nervously at the Moai. Those coral eyes no longer feel purely protective. They glare, unblinking, as if silently asking, "Why are you stripping the land I gave you?" You picture a villager lying awake, hearing wind whistle across barren slopes, remembering when palms swayed like green guardians. Historians still argue whether the people realized the danger too late, or whether they were trapped by cultural momentum, unable to stop building statues without losing face. Either way, the forests are gone, and the consequences are beginning to echo as you stand on a hill, looking across an island scarred with stumps, the sea roaring as if mocking human stubbornness. And for the first time, you feel a chill. Paradise, once lush and fragile, has tipped toward loss. You feel the mood of the island shifting as you walk along the cliffs of Orongo, where the sea smashes violently below. The Moai still stand on platforms, but their prestige is beginning to fade. With forest gone, with food scarcer, the people's faith turns to something new, something risky, daring, almost theatrical. This is the rise of the Birdman cult. Imagine the cliffs at dawn. Dozens of men gather at the edge, muscles tense, eyes fixed on the waves that batter jagged islets offshore. Those rocky specks, Motu Nui and Motu Iti, are the stage for a contest that will decide power for the coming year. The challenge: swim across shark-infested waters, scale cliffs slick with guano, and bring back the very first egg of the sooty tern, a seabird that nests there each spring. Winner takes all? Well, not the swimmer himself. His sponsoring chief, Ora Reiki, gains the title of Birdman, and with it, authority over the island. You squint into the spray and feel your stomach twist. One slip on those volcanic cliffs, and you're gone. Sharks circle below, seabirds scream overhead. Yet men leap fearlessly into the water, their bodies slicing through waves, arms thrashing against the current. The crowd cheers from above. Priests chant. Shell trumpets roar, and historians still argue whether this cult replaced the Moai tradition out of necessity or evolved alongside it as a new expression of power. Either way, by the 16th and 17th centuries, the statues were no longer the sole focus of belief. The Birdman cult had seized center stage. One quirky tidbit: the competitors carried little reed floats tucked under their chest, like prehistoric pool noodles, to help them survive the brutal swim. Picture a proud warrior, face painted, clutching what amounts to a giant vegetable floaty while sharks circle. The survival demands creativity, not dignity. As you peer at the petroglyphs scratched into the rocks of Orongo, you see birdmen carved everywhere, half human, half frigate bird, heads elongated, wings outstretched. They are etched in dozens, maybe hundreds, a frenzy of symbols proclaiming the power of flight, fertility, and daring. Each carving whispers, the old ways are shifting. Mana now comes not from stone giants, but from eggs snatched off cliffs. By dusk, the victorious champion returns, clutching a fragile egg between trembling fingers. The crowd roars. The sponsoring chief lifts the egg skyward, his face painted red and white, his head shaved save for a tuft bound with feathers. He is now Tangata Manu, the Birdman. Songs erupt, feast follow, and the island realigns under his authority until the next contest. You sit on the cliff's edge, wind lashing your face, the ocean darkening below. The Moai inland still stare, but fewer people gather at their bases now. Instead, the energy, the risk, the thrill pulses here at Orongo. The cult of the ancestors has tilted into the cult of the bird, and with it, the island's faith has traded stone for flight. You leave the cliffs of Orongo behind, your ears still echoing with the chants of the Birdman ceremonies, and head inland where the volcanic rock tells quieter stories. On the black surfaces of lava flows and boulders, you see them petroglyphs scratched by steady hands, images etched into stone centuries ago. The island, it seems, is covered in whispers carved where time cannot erase them. You kneel beside one, a bird figure, its wings stretched, its head tilted upward as if forever calling. Nearby, spirals curl like waves frozen mid-motion. Another carving shows a fish, simple but fluid, its body twisting as though swimming across the rock. These are not idle doodles, they're messages, records, prayers. Mainstream historians interpret them as part of ceremonial traditions, often linked to the Birdman cult. Spirals, fish, and birds became sacred symbols, reminders of fertility, food, and divine power. Scholars still argue, though, whether each symbol carried a strict meaning, or whether they were layered with multiple interpretations depending on who was watching. The quirky part? Some petroglyphs resemble European ships, yet they predate the first known European arrival. Were these coincidences? Stylized birds mistaken for sails? Or visions? Prophecies scratched by islanders who dreamed of strangers from across the sea. Archaeologists raise their eyebrows, but you can't help smirking at the thought of a prehistoric artist accidentally inventing clip art for galleons. You run your fingertips along grooves worn shallow by time. The stone feels cool, rough, but the intent is sharp as ever. Imagine the scene. A priest crouches here with obsidian tool in hand, scratching by firelight. Sparks fly as the blade carves. Chants rise softly behind him, and each line is both art and invocation. The rock face becomes a canvas, a temple, and a diary all at once. Nearby, you see the outline of a lizard, symbol of fertility, and rows of circles thought to represent bird eggs. You pause, remembering the danger of retrieving those eggs from offshore cliffs. Here, on safe ground, those same eggs are immortalized, eternal trophies that won't break in a careless hand. You look up and notice the density. Hundreds of petroglyphs crowd together on single panels. It's overwhelming, like graffiti walls in a modern city. Layers of voices competing to be heard. Perhaps clans vied here, carving their victories, their claims, their power, or perhaps each mark was a prayer, small but insistent, adding to the chorus until the whole stone sang. As dusk settles, you picture a gathering here, villagers kneeling before the petroglyphs, touching carved spirals with reverent fingers. A shell trumpet blares in the distance, echoing across the lava plains. Torches flicker, illuminating winged figures etched into the rock. Shadows stretch, and the birdmen seem to move, wings trembling as if ready to lift into night. You sit back, stars slowly emerging overhead. The Moai may be silent, the Birdman cult may thrill with its daring competitions, but here the petroglyphs tell another story, one of endurance. Stone speaks, if you're willing to listen, and tonight, the island feels like a vast library. Its pages written not in ink, but in scratches across volcanic rock. You wake to a heavier silence now, one not filled with drums or laughter. The island feels tense, as if it has tightened its belt and is waiting for relief that never comes. Gardens struggle in eroded soil. Seabird colonies have dwindled, and with forests gone, fishing canoes are scarce. Hunger presses in from all sides. You can sense it in the thinner faces of villagers. in the sharper tones of their quarrels. Paradise is no longer holding. Mainstream historians describe this period as a time of famine and warfare, when rival clans, once locked in competition over statues, turned on one another for survival. Statues toppled in raids, not from earthquakes or chance, but from deliberate sabotage. Giant ancestors dragged down in symbolic humiliation. You walk past a fallen Moai, its face cracked in the dirt, and the silence feels cruel. Ancestors once raised to guard the living now lie abandoned, their mana dissipated into the ground. Here's the unsettling, quirky tidbit. Oral traditions whisper of cannibalism during these desperate times. Bones have been found with marks that suggest cooking, hearths with fragments that don't belong to fish or chicken. Imagine the horror of a feast where the meal is not your catch of the day, but your captured rival. Scholars still argue whether cannibalism was widespread necessity, limited ritual, or exaggerated later by Europeans seeking lurid tales. But you can't shake the image of fires flickering against faces too thin, and smoke rising with the smell no one dares name. You walk through a village site, huts collapsed, gardens overrun, the air sharp with tension. Men sharpen obsidian blades, their edges gleaming black in the sun. Women gather what little tubers remain, their movements quick, wary. Children huddle closer to fires. The island that once pulsed with feasts and song now thrums with suspicion, fear, and hunger. And yet, even in this darkness, rituals continue. Shell trumpets still sound, though now their echoes feel more like warnings than celebrations. Priests still chant, though their voices crack with weariness. The Moai still loom, though toppled and scarred, like stern reminders of promises broken. Night falls, and you imagine the flicker of a war party's fire. Shadows move, bodies painted, spears tipped with obsidian glinting. Drums beat, not for dance but for battle. The air tastes of smoke and dread. In the distance, a cry echoes, whether of challenge, pain, or hunger. You can't tell. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, letting the darkness settle. This is the island at its lowest. The fragile experiment of paradise cracking under the weight of ambition and scarcity. And though historians debate how widespread or how desperate things became, the truth is unavoidable. Hunger reshaped the island, and survival demanded choices that left scars not only on the land, but on memory. You blink awake to the sight of sails, strange, towering shapes moving across the horizon. At first, you think they're clouds, but then you realize Europeans have arrived. Wooden ships, their masts stiff as spears, glide toward the shore. Cannons poke from their sides. Iron gleams in the sun, and flags whip in the salt wind. The islanders gather at the coast, shell trumpets sounding, voices calling, curiosity crackling in the air. After centuries of isolation, Rapa Nui has been discovered from the outside. Mainstream records tell us the first European landing was in 1722, when Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen stepped ashore on Easter Sunday, hence the name Easter Island. His crew marveled at the Moai, those towering stone faces, and scribbled notes about an island that seemed both barren and populated. You picture the Dutch sailors squinting at statues, whispering, how did they even get these things here? The same question you've been asking all night. The islanders, meanwhile, stare at the European ships with equal awe. Iron tools, weapons, cloth, mirrors, things unseen in Rapa Nui for generations, glitter like magic. Gifts are exchanged. Misunderstandings flare. Historians still argue whether the first contacts were peaceful, hostile, or a mix of both. Some accounts speak of friendly trade, others of sudden skirmishes where muskets cracked and islanders fell. The truth is hazy, as if fog settled over memory. Here's a quirky, jarring image. One sailor wrote that the islanders tried to touch their hats, as if fascinated by fashion rather than muskets. You chuckle. Imagine surviving centuries of rivalry and famine, then being utterly floored by a good tricorn hat. But fascination comes with a cost. Diseases hitch rides on these ships: smallpox, tuberculosis, measles, illnesses the island has never known. Invisible enemies slip ashore. Spreading faster than any spear or flame, the population begins to shrink. Bodies weaken not by hunger this time, but by microbes carried in sailors' breath. As the years roll, other European ships follow. Spaniards in 1770, British explorer James Cook in 1774, and countless traders after. Each leaves its mark. Trinkets traded, conflicts sparked, diseases spread. The statues still stand, though many have toppled. The old rivalries blur under this new intrusion. The islanders who once looked inland to Moai for protection now gaze nervously outward, toward ships that bring both wonder and devastation. At dusk, you sit on a ridge overlooking the bay. Fires flicker along the coast as islanders watch the ships drift offshore. Shell trumpets sound, low and uncertain, no longer pure calls of ceremony but signals of warning. You realize the island has stepped into a new story, one written by outsiders as much as by its own people. The age of stone guardians is colliding with the age of iron and gunpowder, and nothing will ever be quite the same again. The sails fade from memory, but the damage lingers. Years pass, and darker ships arrive, not explorers, but hunters of human lives. In the 1860s, Peruvian slavers descend on Rapa Nui, their boats anchored like vultures offshore. Armed men storm the beaches, seizing islanders and dragging them in chains to be shipped off to guano mines and plantations. The air fills with screams, with the desperate blare of shell trumpets that once called a feast but now cry warnings too late. Mainstream records estimate that more than 1,000 Rapa Nui were kidnapped in these raids. Nearly half the island's remaining population, chiefs, priests, even the few who still remembered the old glyphs of Rongorongo, all torn away. The loss is staggering, like ripping out the heart of a culture in a single sweep. Historians still argue whether some islanders resisted with violence or whether overwhelming force crushed every attempt at defense. The result is clear either way. Families fractured, villages hollowed, mana stolen not just in spirit but in flesh. You walk along the shore in imagination, seeing footprints in the sand that end abruptly at the waterline. Mothers wail, children cling to the shadows of huts, and elders stand with blank eyes, unable to stop the tide. And out at sea, ships sail away heavy with captives, the cries growing faint until only the gulls hear them. A quirky, tragic detail haunts you. Some of those taken included the last people who fully knew the Rongorongo script. When they were lost in mines in Peru, so too was much of the island's memory. Imagine a whole library stuffed into living minds, and then burned in a single generation's theft. To make matters worse, a handful of captives who later returned brought smallpox and tuberculosis. Disease spread like wildfire across a population already thinned by famine and raids. Graves multiplied. The Moai stood over emptying villages, their coral eyes long gone, their silence now unbearable. By the time you wander through the ruins of a village, the silence feels heavy. The laughter you heard at feasts, the chants at platforms, the daring contests on cliffs all seem like echoes swallowed by the waves. A child plays with a broken shell trumpet, its sound thin, almost mocking the grandeur it once had. You close your eyes, and the island feels hollow, as though its spirit has been fractured and carried away across the sea. Night settles, and the stars blaze indifferently. The statues are still there, shadows etched against the sky, but their guardianship feels powerless. You lie back on the grass, staring upward, realizing this is the island's darkest hour. A people stolen, a culture gutted, ancestors left to watch over emptiness. You wander through the ruins of a once bustling village, the air unnaturally still. The echo of shell trumpets and feasts has faded, replaced by the faint tolling of a new sound. Church bells. Missionaries have come. They arrive with crosses, Bibles, and the promise of salvation. carrying words foreign to the ears of Rapa Nui, where once chants in ancestral rhythm filled the air. Now hymns float across the island in Latin, Spanish, and French. Mainstream records say Catholic missionaries reached Rapa Nui in the 1860s, not long after the devastation of the Peruvian slave raids. With disease thinning the population and old systems collapsing, the new faith found fertile ground. Stone platforms were abandoned, toppled Moai left to weather in silence. Villagers were baptized, their names replaced with Christian ones, their rituals reshaped into church attendance. Historians still argue whether the people embraced the new religion wholeheartedly or clung quietly to older traditions beneath the surface. Perhaps, like so many communities under pressure, they did both, adapting outwardly while keeping embers of the old faith glowing in private. You picture a Sunday morning service. The small wooden chapel creaks, filled with islanders wearing crosses around their necks, their lips forming unfamiliar prayers. Children squirm on benches. The priest raises a chalice, sunlight glinting through crude glass. Outside, the toppled heads of Moai lie in the dust, watching as their people sing words not meant for them. It's a strange collision of worlds. The silence of stone and the rising voice of hymns. A quirky tidbit lingers. Some missionaries banned the playing of drums and shell trumpets, calling them pagan. Imagine the disappointment of a teenager who just mastered the conch, only to be told, sorry, no more prehistoric jazz. Yet music didn't vanish, it transformed, woven into choral chants and later guitars, evolving with each generation. The loss of language bites hardest. The ancient chants fade, replaced by European alphabets. The mysterious script of Rongorongo, already endangered after the slave raids, slips closer to extinction. Children are taught to read and write in Spanish, not in the glyphs carved on wooden planks. You sit by a fire at night, listening to elders mutter stories, but even they hesitate, unsure whether to pass them on. Faith in the Moai dwindles, replaced by faith in distant saints. And yet, the islanders adapt. Gardens still grow, fishing still happens, children still laugh. Life reshapes itself around new structures. Church bells mark time now, but the wind still whistles through the ruins of Ahu platforms. The Moai still lie where they fell, silent, unblinking, as if waiting. You lean against a stone wall, hearing both the echo of chants long gone and the faint chime of bells drifting on the evening wind. It's a bittersweet harmony, old and new, fading and enduring. Rapa Nui has survived catastrophe, slavery, and silence. Now it reshapes itself under foreign prayers. But beneath the hymns, you sense the heartbeat of the island still murmuring. Stubborn and steady, refusing to vanish entirely, you wander to a hut where, hidden in the shadows, lies something extraordinary. Wooden planks carved with neat rows of tiny glyphs, each symbol curling, looping, and twisting like no alphabet you've ever seen. This is Rongorongo, the island's mysterious script, the only written language ever discovered in Polynesia. Your fingers itch to trace the grooves, but you hold back, sensing how fragile and precious they are. Mainstream historians describe Rongorongo as a system of glyphs carved with obsidian or shark teeth on wooden tablets. Each line runs alternately left to right, then right to left, in a style called baustrophiedon, like the path of an ox plowing a field. The figures are elegant, little people, birds, plants, geometric designs. Some scholars suggest they represent genealogies, chants, or calendars. Others believe they hold myths and sacred rituals. Historians still argue whether this was true writing in the sense of encoding spoken language, or more of a mnemonic device to help recite memorized text. The debate leaves the tablets suspended in mystery. Their voices locked away, you imagine a priest sitting cross-legged by torchlight, a tablet balanced on his lap. His fingers trace the symbols as he chants, each glyph a spark to memory. Around him, villagers listen, their faces glowing in the flickering light, as stories of gods, ancestors, and rituals unfold. These tablets aren't just records, they are vessels of mana, sacred energy bound in wood. Here's the quirky heartbreak. Most Rongorongo tablets were lost or burned after the arrival of missionaries and colonizers. Some were used as fuel. Others traded to sailors for trinkets. By the time European linguists realized their importance, only a few dozen remained. And the tragic kicker, the last islanders who could read them were carried away in the Peruvian slave raids. The code has never been cracked. It's like finding the books of an entire library, but with no one left to teach you the alphabet. You squint at a glyph shaped like a bird, its wings curved. Another resembles a fish, its tail flicked as if mid-swim. Rows of little human figures kneel, dance, or gesture. The effect is hypnotic, like a secret choreography carved into wood. You can almost hear the cadence of a chant hidden behind each line, waiting for someone to sing it back into being. At night, the fire pops, and the tablets gleam faintly. You think about all the words that once poured from these symbols. All the knowledge silenced by disease, slavery, and neglect. Yet the wood still whispers, stubbornly holding its secrets. Somewhere out there, perhaps, lies the key, a pattern in the glyphs, a memory passed down in a chant, a thread waiting to be pulled. Until then, the Rongorongo remains an unsolved riddle. A locked door in the story of Rapa Nui. You lie back, the image of glyphs dancing in your vision like glowing embers. Above, the Milky Way arches, a cosmic script written in stars. Maybe that's the point. You realize words can vanish, but meaning always finds another surface to cling to. Whether in wood, in memory, or in the night sky itself, you wake to the buzz of modern tools and the hum of generators. The air smells faintly of diesel, mixing with a salt spray. Around you, archaeologists in bright vests and wide hats swarm the ancient platforms, their hands brushing dust from stone, their drones buzzing overhead. The Moai, once toppled and half buried, are being studied, restored, and in some cases, raised back onto their ahu. The island, long silent, is speaking again through the hands of researchers and descendants alike. Mainstream history shows how the 20th and 21st centuries brought waves of scientific rediscovery. Excavations revealed that many Moai weren't just heads, but full-bodied figures buried up to their shoulders. You grin, thinking of the centuries when people joked Easter Island was just a land of floating heads. Only for archaeologists to dig deeper and find the torsos waiting patiently underground. Quirky detail. Some bodies even have intricate carvings on their backs. Designs hidden for centuries like tattoos covered by earth. Teams measure, photograph, scan, and analyze. LiDAR sweeps across the landscape, mapping every stone platform. Drones hover over Ranoraraku, capturing the crater in impossible detail. In labs, sediment samples reveal how soils were managed, how volcanic rock mulches improved yields. Historians still argue about the exact methods of transport, dragging versus walking the statues upright. But with every experiment, the possibilities sharpen. You watch as a group of volunteers tie ropes around a replica Moai, chanting in rhythm as they rocket side to side, inching forward. It waddles, awkward and majestic, like a giant toddler learning to walk. Under torchlight centuries ago, you realize it would have looked like pure magic. But modern rediscovery isn't only about stone. It's also about memory. Elders share stories, chants, fragments of oral history that survived colonial silence. Archaeologists listen, recording not just artifacts but voices. You watch a Rapa Nui descendant kneel beside a fallen statue. Pressing her forehead to the stone, she whispers in the old tongue, her words private, but the reverence unmistakable. Science measures, but faith breathes life back in. At night, you stroll through a site lit by work lamps. The Moai, upright again, loom against the stars. Their sockets are empty, but even so, their presence hums. Nearby, Students scribble in notebooks. Archaeologists argue over coffee cups, and drones buzz like mechanical insects. The island is no longer isolated. It's a global puzzle, attracting minds from everywhere. Yet for all the technology, one truth lingers. The Moai still keep their best secrets. A quirky thought slips in. Somewhere, an archaeologist probably lost a drone to the relentless wind. Watching it spiral into the sea, you smirk. Future historians will puzzle over tiny metal birds that crashed offshore in the 2000s. You lie back in the grass as the generators quiet, and stars reclaim the sky. The statues stand, some restored, others still fallen, each a question mark in stone. Modern science may never answer everything, and maybe that's fine. Mystery has its own mana. The hum of machines fades, replaced by laughter, music, and the smell of roasted food drifting from a modern festival. You're no longer in the shadow of collapse. You're in the heart of revival. Today, the Rapa Nui people, descendants of those first daring voyagers, dance again under the same stars. Their movements bold, their songs strong. The island is alive with cultural pride, a pulse that survived centuries of silence. You wander through Hangaroe, the island's main town, where drums pound from a stage. Dancers in feathered costumes sway, their bodies painted in swirling patterns of white and red. They leap, chant, and twirl, their voices carrying old rhythms into the modern night. Tourists watch in awe, smartphones glowing like fireflies. But the performance isn't just for visitors, it's for ancestors. For continuity, for proving the culture still breathes. Mainstream accounts note how the Tapati Rapa Nui Festival, held each year, celebrates this resilience. For weeks, the island bursts with competitions, parades, and ceremonies that blend ancient traditions with modern flair. One event even revives a version of the Birdman contest, not with sharks and deadly cliffs, but with athletes racing down hills on banana stem sleds. You laugh imagining the original competitors with reed floaties. Then compare them to modern kids zooming downhill, grass flying everywhere. Some things never change. The thrill of daring, the pride of winning. A quirky tidbit. In recent decades, Rapa Nui has pushed hard to reclaim its language, teaching it in schools and broadcasting it on local radio. You imagine a teenager groaning about homework in Rapa Nui tongue or rolling their eyes exactly as ancestors once did when asked to fetch water. It's ordinary life, but that ordinariness is victory after centuries of suppression. Tourism fuels much of this revival. Flights land daily, bringing people eager to see the Moai up close. Guides lead them across quarries, platforms, and cliffs, weaving history with legend. Historians still argue whether the influx is more blessing or curse, bringing money and visibility, but also pressure on fragile ecosystems. Yet as you listen to a guide sing part of an old chant for wide-eyed visitors, you feel the balance tilt toward preservation. The island is telling its story again, on its own terms. At sunset, you join a crowd on the coast. Drums pound, conch shells blare, dancers whirl. The statues, backlit by fiery skies, watch over it all. Some tourists clap offbeat, some locals grin and roll their eyes. But everyone is bound by the same awe. You bite into roasted tuna from a food stall, salty and smoky, and realize how flavors, sounds, and stories knit past and present together. As night spreads, fireworks burst overhead, modern sparks above ancient stone, children shriek, elders smile, and somewhere, a shell trumpet calls, echoing across cliffs just as it did centuries ago. The giants may be silent, but their people are not. Rapa Nui endures, proud and defiant, dancing under the stars once more. Moonlight spills across the island, silvering the waves as they crash against jagged black rock. You walk slowly now, letting the air grow cooler, softer. Ahead, Moai stand in rows, their silhouettes carved sharp against a star-flecked sky. They are silent, as they have always been, But tonight their silence feels less like absence and more like presence, a quiet watchfulness that holds you in place. You settle in the grass near an ahu, the sea roaring at your back. The statues face inland, their hollow eyes gazing forever at the land. At the people they once guarded, you imagine coral eyes blazing again, catching moonlight, glowing with mana. For a moment, you almost feel their gaze shift to you, a reminder that this island story isn't just about the past, but about how memory keeps walking forward. Historians still argue whether the collapse of Rapa Nui was inevitable, whether deforestation doomed it, or whether people adapted more resiliently than the old ecocide myth suggests. The debates swirl like wind across the island, one side painting tragedy, the other resilience. Maybe both are true. Maybe every toppled Moai, every scratched petroglyph, every whispered chant carried both warning and hope. You think back on quirky details, rats chewing through palm seeds, warriors floating on reed noodles for a Birdman contest, kids probably daring each other to stick out their tongues at statues. Those small flashes of humor soften the weight of history, reminding you that real people lived here. Not just myths, not just ruins, but families who laughed, feasted, quarreled, and dreamed. The shell trumpet calls in your imagination, low and mournful, drifting across moonlit cliffs. It isn't warning this time, nor summoning. It's simply existing. As steady and timeless as the waves, you breathe slower, letting the sound carry you. You lie back, the grass cool against your skin, and the stars open above like the world's oldest storybook. The Moai loom, their shadows stretching long, their silence patient. They don't need to speak. Their presence is enough. The island exhales, and so do you. And now, let the story fade gently, like embers cooling in a hearth. The roar of the ocean softens into a distant hush, the crash of waves smoothing into the rhythm of breath. The statues, tall and still, blur into silhouettes that no longer demand attention. They simply stand, steady, as they have for centuries. The grass beneath you feels softer, the air warmer, the night kinder. You trace the journey once more in your mind, not with urgency, but with the unhurried drift of someone half asleep. Canoes cutting across the Pacific, forests swaying in green abundance, feasts glowing with laughter and drumbeats, statues rising from quarries, swaying across the land, their eyes opened in shimmering ceremony. Then the silences, forest gone, feasts shrinking, statues falling. And finally, the rediscovery, the revival, the laughter of children racing barefoot under fireworks while ancestors watch from stone. The echoes of shell trumpets still linger, but now they're softer, like a lullaby played from far across the sea. You let the sound guide your breathing. Slow inhale, slower exhale. The weight of history melts into a gentle reassurance. People endured through hunger, through loss, through change. The island remained, and it still remains, glowing under the same stars you see above you now. Your eyelids grow heavy. The statues recede into the horizon of dream, their presence no longer watchful, but comforting. Like guardians who promise to stand through the night so you don't have to. The wind calms, the waves slow. The story rests sleep. Now, with the island at peace, the giants will keep their watch. The sea will sing its endless lullaby. And you can drift gently into dreams,